Hey, brand builders, ready to take your brand to the next level? I'm Dana Ammons, and welcome to the Brand Blueprint.
Welcome back to the Brand Blueprint, the show where we uncover the stories, strategies, and soul behind some of the most compelling brand builders of today. I'm your host, Dana Ammons, and today we're kicking off a very special series, which I am super excited about. This is a partnership with an organization called SeedSpot, and SeedSpot is an incredible organization empowering impact-driven entrepreneurs across the country. Now, I recently became engaged with SeedSpot through a mentorship opportunity with their Retail Accelerator. And I want to talk a little bit about that program today, but we're also going to talk a little bit about the vast number of programs that SeedSpot actually supports the startup and entrepreneur community with. And so this episode sets the stage for what's ahead as we're going to dive into some of SeedSpot's mission, curriculum, national reach, and how they're helping founders scale with purpose. Now, to do all of that, I have a very special guest with me today. And joining me is VP of Programming at SeedSpot, Tristan. And Tristan, I'm really so happy to have you on the show today because I could not do this justice without having somebody who is at the heart of SeedSpot's programming really come in and tell our audience a lot about what SeedSpot does and potentially some of our founders who are looking for programs like yours, why SeedSpot might be a great fit for them. So thank you for joining the Brand Blueprint.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
So now, before we jump into the meat and potatoes of the interview, as I said, we have a really fun segment we like to start off with, call it our rapid fire question and answer segment. So are you ready to get into that?
Oh.
All right, great. Now, look. Every show we start with this question is something that I'm always fascinated by, which is high achievers or high functioning people, what their routines are and how they start the day. And so I'll start that question with you, which is coffee or tea?
So I actually don't drink either.
Okay. Great question.
Yeah, I start my day. I do start it with an energy drink of sorts to kind of get me up and going early in the morning. I drink, can I product place here? But I drink Celsius.
Yeah, you could definitely.
Okay, I drink about a half a can of Celsius to start my day at roughly 4:30 to 5 o'clock in the morning.
Wow. Okay. So very early start and you found the product. And Celsius is a fairly new product right on the market. So did you evolve there? Were you always in the energy space and you kind of found that Celsius fit your needs or you kind of stumbled on it? Tell me a little bit about it.
I think it's called devolved. So I was a non-caffeinated human being for a majority of my life. And then coming off my second born and a pandemic, I was just not getting up and Gideon like I used to. So I actually don't know what the start of it was. I don't know I don't know if it was just in our home or wherever I was at. But because I'm, kind of caffeine sensitive, I only had just a little bit and that was enough.
Enough.
I'm sure I'm like, embalming my insides with it, but it does the job. So
No, look, I mean, it's just fascinating because I worked in my previous life for Pepsi when Pepsi was jumping into the energy space at the time. Rockstar was the only kind of key brand. Coke had the relationship with Rockstar. So in that, beverage battle, Pepsi had to go find their alternative, which was Monster. And so I, remember, kind of in that space thinking like, oh, okay, this to your point, I started off my career actually as a non-caffeine person, frankly, just because it wasn't something that I grew up with. And so coming out of college and going into corporate America, it was at every meeting break, every office had it. They would always offer you coffee when you came in. So I just kind of drank it by default. And then I quickly realized it wasn't for my stomach. Like I was having all these stomach issues. And so to your point, I was looking for caffeine alternatives. So did you know early on in your life that caffeine was something that just didn't really work for you, period? Or were you intuitive, kind of like, hey, I'm not going to start the coffee thing?
No, I actually started, I don't know how far back we want to go, but my first job out of college, I was an elementary school teacher. I worked on a neighborhood called Inglewood on Chicago's South Side. And coffee is very much a part of teaching. The only way I could stomach it was with like ungodly amounts of artificial sugar. So it had gotten to the point where I was going through like multiple pots a day.
Yep.
And I was having all of these like reactions as I was
Yep.
building tolerance. I was also
Yep.
destroying my body. And so I
Yep.
quit cold turkey.
Yep.
And I was like, I never want to drink something I A, have to be dependent on for functioning, and B, has anything artificial in it. So that was in my early 20s. I'm now 40 and just put my toe back into the energy drink pond. So it lasted roughly, I don't know, 30 seconds or so is what it feels like in the end. But ultimately, I think all of us experienced chaos during 20 and trying to make sense of that and trying to show up for our community and our families. And so that's what opened the door to doing something. And you think I would have gone to coffee, but I didn't. Something natural, if you will. No, I sure didn't. So, but yeah, here we are.
No, I mean, look, it's a great point, because the journey for every consumer is different, right? The driving reasons why you start the journey might be similar, but where you end up on that journey, it could be very different. Now, you said something there that is always, I tend to go left field on some of these questions because you bring up something interesting, but I heard Chicago, South Side there, and starting your career as a teacher, all super fascinating to me. That we could probably go down the whole path, but I'll ask a second question because of your Midwest ties and your ties to Arizona, in the sense that, having lived here in Arizona twice, I've noticed this very distinct relationship between the Midwest and Arizona, specifically between Chicago and Arizona. So asking the second question is, preference if you had to pick one climate to live in full time: Arizona, Southeast or Southwestern, arid desert climate, or would you prefer the Midwest 4-season full-on winter climate?
Yeah. So as I record this with you, I am in Chicago. I am what I call a sunbird. So, a lot of people come to Arizona as snowbirds. I'm based in Phoenix. My husband's also from Chicago. So we pack up the littles and we spend our summers in.
Nice.
Nice. I can't pick. They both have, and I won't pick. It's like having two kids and picking a favorite. They are both good for different reasons. We also got super fortunate. We came to Arizona at a time where buying a house was something you absolutely could do. You could build a family. You could have space. So it was just the timing of when we came out and adulted. We got really, really fortunate. But there is so much nostalgia for me. I think the thing I miss most in Phoenix is water. Lake Michigan. I grew up on a small lake in northern Illinois for a large part of my life. I joke the colors green and blue. But I will say the lifestyle, I'm super active. I get up early. I do Camelback or Piestewa. I love the desert too for different reasons. And
we share that.
Yeah. So I'm kind of stuck between these two polarities. And I think that that's normal. I think having one thing consistently, but it's so funny because, people gripe about Arizona heat. And I'm like, Chicago winters are just opposite end of the same spectrum, right? So I think both of them build resilient humans. I think both of them are really difficult to manage. And I think if you can survive them, you are a stronger person overall. So similar.
I agree.
But I don't know that I would pick one or the other, which is why I haven't had to and why I won't.
No. And it's a great lifestyle, I'm sure, because as a fellow Midwesterner who grew up in Omaha, Nebraska, I share that similar kind of plus and minuses of both environments, right? Now, unlike you, I don't desire to go back to my hometown because it has a completely different context, size, et cetera, right? And I prefer a big city, but I'm also a really outdoors guy. I love mountain biking. I was out on the trails this weekend, to your point, whether it's hiking or even, and some people kind of cynically go, you can't really fish in Arizona. You can. You got to drive a couple of 100 miles outside of the city, to go north into the mountains, but you can figure it out, right? But to your point, there's just certain parts of the Midwest experience, like real fishing on Lake Michigan or other places, that you can't replicate, right? And so another thing you can't replicate is cuisine. Got to ask the question. So favorite Chicago, and I won't say any food, but because I am a fanatic of Chicago-style hot dogs, I had an Italian beef from Portillo's yesterday, which I still kind of think is a bit of a knockoff here in the desert, but I take it for what I can get, right? So Favorite Chicago spot in Phoenix is the question.
Well, I mean, I think it's really like, if you want to look at it from a business perspective, I think it's really interesting that Portillo's and Lou Malnati's came to Phoenix, and they did that. There is a company, Taste of Chicago, that ships cold frozen products. And they track zip codes. Where were they shipping to most? And that's where they chose to open when they went public.
Oh, that's why.
Because they knew that there was an infrastructure here that would continue and then bring their Arizona friends and Arizona families and get them addicted.
Yeah.
Also did a really good job of where they opened. It's right by Cub Stadium, Sloan Park. Like they positioned themselves really well from a business perspective. There's some hot tea, if you will. So there is a small pizza place. It's called Aurelio's is the original.
Aurelio's? Okay.
And so Chicago pizza depends on who you are. I would say that the tourist gimmick is deep dish. If you're really from Chicago, you're getting paper thin cracker crust. And so Aurelio's has a really delicious crust. Originally, I believe the lore that was told to me was that two brothers were running Aurelio's together. There was a falling out. One of them relocated to Arizona and has opened up a pizza shop in Arizona that is well known, and I won't name it. It has the same flavor of sauce, the same type of crust, and so it is of home, if you will. It is quite literally the very similar recipe. So
no way. And I'm assuming that because of the lore and the potential legality of said spinoff. Exactly. Neither one of us, the show will not delve into that. So the audience knows we edited out any reminiscence, and this is not referring to any business or person that we know of. This is all fictional conversation. But if it were not fictional, right, you could potentially find this place in the Valley. So I will be on the lookout for that. Look, great opportunity to get to know you a little bit better, but I know we need to shift to the main course of the interview. We're going to have you back again to learn a little bit more about the Chicago, Arizona connection, because I think even having a conversation about sunbirds, which I think is a phenomenon that people don't really understand, right? They think of older retirees, people who are, headed south or headed, out to a place in Florida or somewhere and just kind of, out of sight for 6 months. But I honestly believe that is your lifestyle is where many, especially Midwestern, middle-aged couples and singles will likely start to mimic, especially after COVID, which I think taught a lot of us that even if we don't have 100% remote opportunity to work, we can kind of figure it out, right? And so I do think that lifestyle is going to be a trend, let's say, moving forward, especially from people I know who feel like they're stuck in the Midwest and can't kind of get out into a new lifestyle.
Well, and I'll add too, I think the thing that really pushed, we have all these transplants from the Midwest, and then they started building families. And you crave as a parent the ability to go catch fireflies, the ability to go to the lake, the ability to get grass stains. And when your kids aren't able to see the leaves change and experience those moments from your childhood, you go seek it. So a lot of the friends that we connect, I mean, my best friend she's from Ohio, takes her kids back to Ohio. My other best friend, she married somebody from Copenhagen. And so they spend a big chunk of summer in Copenhagen. So I think the remote life, I think the school break being set up the way that it is, really allows for that flexibility to go out into where you came from and experience it through the eyes of your children.
Yeah. And it's the one probably drawback I have mentioned about life in Arizona is that this community is frankly a community of transplants, and the community of people who are actually from Arizona is extremely small and they tend to be elusive to find and identify. So the community here is largely a transplant community, which I think, to your point, encourages going back. My kids have since left the house, but we raised them primarily here in Arizona. And at that time, they actually went back to Arkansas from as soon as school was out in May. Between my ex-wife's family and my family, we were both fortunate enough to have a couple of people in our family who had these extended old school kind of vacation days that you could roll year to year, right? So her mom and my mom, between the two of them, had something crazy like 250 unused vacation days. And so every summer they would just take a month and a half, 2 months out and keep the grandkids and just allow them to your point, get a taste of not truly what we kind of experienced growing up, right? Because it was obviously embellished because we've actually made it. We've done a little bit better, right? But they got a very cool way to plug back in the family and to culture in a way that I think, to your point, you just can't replicate out here in the Valley. So very, very cool. Thank you for sharing that personal side of your story. Now, are you ready to jump into the core interview and talk a little bit more about
this?
Exactly. All right. Well, let's jump in. Look, now I want to first just give those people who are just now discovering SeedSpot a bit of a primer on what SeedSpot is. So can you give our audience the big picture? What is SeedSpot? What makes it different from other accelerators and support organizations out there?
You got it. So SeedSpot is, I like to say, an educational nonprofit. We've been around almost 15 years. And we always have worked in the space of helping social impact businesses. So businesses that are doing good in the world. Originally, there were statistics that were thrown around like 70% of startups failed. And we know that, right? If you are underrepresented, if you are a female founder, those stats are even higher. And if you're a social impact business, those stats are even higher. So the idea and the name of the organization was seed, like an idea, being planted in a spot that was safe, where you could learn. Potentially you don't have a business background. Potentially you don't have a family of entrepreneurs. Where is a space for you to learn and test and design a business for impact? Our very first program was a year-long accelerator, which blows my mind. I can't imagine. I know. I can't imagine the lift that program took. We still have traces of what that program looked like. Mentorship, community building has always been at the core of the work that we do. A lot of traditional accelerators are lecture-based. We look really in this kind of make and take approach. So how do we give entrepreneurs tools that they can come back to annually to refine how they approach customer, how they approach business model? These graphic organizers is what I often call them, are literally, we give them blanks. And then I love getting an update like, hey, at our team retreat, we came back to our solution and we were able to iterate the language we were using for describing our solution. These are tools that should be evergreen, that like, no matter how long you've been in business, you can always benefit from going back to the basics. And so we really, really work to build a community. So that's through our mentors, much like you. We have mentors in residence. We've got mentor directories. We do events where we invite community mentors in. So the goal is that every entrepreneur leaves with at least 12 new connections in their network that otherwise they wouldn't have. And that's me being really conservative. I think this program we just graduated had more around 35 to 40.
Wow.
I know. It's a lot of work.
But still 35 to 40 new connections that can directly or indirectly help you move your idea along the path to commercialization is just unheard of, right? Because at the end of the day, I think, we push a lot of founders and small business owners to get out there, network, get out there, meet people every day, get out there. But the reality is wherever your community is and whatever you have access to, if you didn't come naturally from that background, you may not have an easy entryway into the right rooms to network, which is what I think one of the things that SeedSpot does is open up that door for you in ways that you couldn't previously. Now, just double tapping that a little bit, can you talk a little bit about the geographic reach of SeedSpot? And if I have a founder who's listening to us right now and they're in Alaska versus if they're in Nebraska, what does SeedSpot mean to those founders?
Well, I'll take one step back first. I want to mention that SeedSpot is an educational nonprofit. And so one of our value propositions are we are agnostic by the type of business. So you could be a nonprofit, you could be a for-profit, you could be a consumer packaged good. There is a program at SeedSpot for you. Now, we originally opened up in Phoenix, Arizona, is where our anchor office is. And then we had a satellite office about 10 years into the company's existence, open out in DC. We had been doing virtual programs before the pandemic. It was an accident. As Bob Ross would say, a happy accident. We had a program morning of, we were told that the participants registered were not local. And so we actually started leveraging about an hour before the program started technology and what that would look like.
Hold on, Tristan, hold on. Side conversation real quick. You guys had a program. Hold on. Let's follow that for a quick second. Yeah. You had a program that the day you started, you found out that they weren't going to physically be where you thought they were physically going to be?
Well, it was a split. So we had about 20 on site, and we had about 20 that had signed up virtually. A lot of the work, because we are a nonprofit, a lot of the work we do is grant funded or partnership based. And so this partner had
communicated virtual
cost of the program and forgot to mention that many of their organization would be joining us virtually. So I remember this, we split the team. Some went to get computers, some went to get headphones, some went to facilitate live. We did our mentor event virtual. And so from there, we were like, oh my goodness, like we would have such a greater reach. And especially as we're talking about, there are people joining us from rural communities that don't have access to a lot of resources. And now with the space of virtual, we can open that up and really help level the playing field for them. And so that has been such a value add. And again, it preceded COVID. We got really polished and really refined in our work during COVID. We've attempted some in-person or hybrid programming starting, I'd say, in about 23, and we still see demand for majority online. People are really appreciating this flexibility, especially as founders who are taking meetings with suppliers or co-packers, and then they can pop onto a class with us and then go back to meet at a partner. So we are still majority, I would say, virtual, but there are tons of opportunities that are in person, and so those virtual opportunities are open. Really, we work globally. We've done some partner work with African entrepreneurs and South American entrepreneurs. We have people just organically find us and join our programs. So if you're willing to get on it, whatever hour that might convert to for you, then who are we to say no? And so we'll support you and we'll make it work.
I love that that aspect of Seed Spot's mission as well, that you guys are literally open arms to every constituent in the startup space, right? And not to criticize other programs, but there are so many programs out there that are niche oriented, very focused, and they do a great job with their constituency, right? And if you don't fit their their parameters, unfortunately, you're not allowed access into those programs. But you guys really do such a phenomenal job of meeting these founders where they are, right? And trying to match their skill sets with the right program. And so I want to talk about one of your recent programs, the one that I was introduced to, which is the Retail Brand Accelerator. Can you talk a little bit about why retail and why now? What was kind of the impetus for putting that program together? And then what were the gaps you were aiming to fill with that program?
Yeah, so that program actually originated with a partner out of North Carolina. We had gone in on a grant together for funding to support a community in North Carolina, specifically looking, again, in the artery of social impact. We were looking at the wealth gap, what happens to a Black dollar, and specifically in North Carolina. And so our hope was by providing quality education with a standing ecosystem, we could provide generational wealth resources, community-based resources. And so that evolved. We had great traction with that program. That evolved into the second iteration of the grant, which was this retail business program. And the goal was to provide diverse founders with access to basically going big, right? Growing into mass retail. And getting their products recognized on shelves, providing them with world-class mentors, facilitators, and resources. There are, for example, there are retailers that have a stronghold on a certain region. I think of Target in Minneapolis. I think of Walmart in Bentonville. So you're outside of those bubbles, the resources are not as broad, right? And so we were able to we did about a year doing R&D and trying to figure out what are best practices. If you're at a certain amount of revenue, what do you need educationally to get you to grow, to feel supported? And then we deployed it. We launched it. It was 4 cohorts that we ran in total. And we do have a capacity grant that our funders giving us for a 5th year. And we're targeting a slightly different segment of the market. I can get to that in a second. But the goal was to help get these companies ready for mass retail. And so we worked with cohorts of about 20 over 2 years. with these retail cohort learning experiences. And then this new program in our capacity grant, our 5th year of the program, is companies that are a little bit smaller. So what does it look like before you get your first big PO or your first big contract? You haven't really met with any buyers. Like, how do you make sure all your ducks are in a row so that you're really well positioned? And so that was born from, we had over the course of 2 years, all of these applicants that were awesome, but just needed a boost and couldn't fit into that program. So we built for that audience.
Eloise, can you bring that back one more time? We need to hear that again.
This new program in our capacity grant, our 5th year of the program, is companies that are a little bit smaller. So what does it look like before you get your first big PO or your first big contract? You haven't really met with any buyers. Like, how do you make sure all your ducks are in a row so that you're really well positioned? And so that was born from, we had over the course of 2 years, all of these applicants that were awesome, but just needed a boost and couldn't fit into that program. So we built for that audience. And we have, I think, this first cohort, which is said to, I believe time is kind of a blur right now for me, but
it's coming up.
I think it's August 5th is our first class. Yeah. We had over 100 applicants for that program.
Wow.
It just shows the demand.
It shows the need. Yeah, the demand is really there. But you guys were also servicing real demand in that you had early stage businesses that had traction and didn't have the support out there. And I think that's important to also call out and note, because it's one of the things that I found really invigorating and refreshing about the Seed Spot program is that it was really, a singular program in the, full toolkit of programs that I've found across the country that really focused on that brand, that retail brand preparation, specifically around, early stage founders. Because what you find, and I think you pointed out, is there are some well-known accelerator programs that will support some of these brands, but they have to be at $1 million of reoccurring revenue or more, which a lot of founders just haven't reached that opportunity or that level of success yet. So I really like that.
Yeah, there are some really amazing people in this space. Skew out of Austin is awesome. I feel like there are not many in the retail space. And I think if I'm going to talk about the secret of why, it's just so hard. I think you have food and bev, you have beauty, you have all of these different kind of buyers and archetypes and needs and shelves that are seriously,
and retailers that also trail with those individual categories. Yep.
And I think what sets Seed Spot up to support these very diverse cohorts, diverse from not only their background, but their products and their offerings, is that we always led into meeting the entrepreneur where they're at and customizing the learning for them. And so now it's, instead of being a nonprofit versus a for-profit, it's an energy drink versus a snack. Right. So we are able to kind of meet them with our directory and our mentors, and we have, foci groups within the cohort so they can support each other. On top of that, capital is such a situation for CPG companies. And so, I think risk and founders' comfort with risk, capital and access to capital. So it really is kind of like a choose your own adventure. And so our cohort might have 20 participants, but no two are going to have the same lived experience. And so my head is always on a swivel.
No, and that is a true testimony. I think my audience would probably be listening and being a little cynical, like, every program says that. But let's talk a little bit about the most recent Retail Brand Accelerator program, because, man, when I tell you the diversity in the types of founders and businesses that you had in this last accelerator, I mean, shout out to all of the founders. But I remember initially jumping in on the meet and greet with the mentors and having this diverse group of founders jump on calls with me. And as I, asked, hey, what is your business or what are you working on? It ranged from hockey stick tape. And you heard that right, audience. We've got a founder who is innovating and literally changing the game in hockey stick tape, which I was educated in that conversation alone about the different types of tape, why tape is so important, all the way to another end of the spectrum to high-end luxury handbags. In between that, there is a tamales business. in addition to a running mitts business, right? Like we're talking really diverse founders. And so I think sometimes, again, the cynicism around some of the accelerators, especially for founders who don't get in these accelerators, tends to be they only want these really polished businesses that are pure plays and a very popular, AI driven concepts. And while that tends to be the case in terms of what is probably making the most news, I think the really good work is being done by organizations like SeedSpot to really support those founders that come from those really diverse sets of backgrounds. So can you talk a little bit about this most recent accelerator and what were some of the key insights and learnings that you and your team saw coming out of? Because as you mentioned, you guys put a lot of work into researching and putting together and structuring these programs to make sure that they're effective. And now you're moving to a different a set or a set of a cohort in a slightly different stage of growth. So what were some of the key learnings as you came out of this really cool, successful group of founders you just worked with?
So every time, one thing, and I don't know if this is because we're a nonprofit or because my background is in education, but one thing I appreciate about SeedSpot is we value data and we collect as much data as we can collect. So what I mean by that is there's a pre-survey where we ask about hopes and dreams and resilience and all of these different phase of business, roadblocks. From those pre-surveys, I cultivate what you're going to experience in a program. I start to recruit certain mentors that match certain needs. Sometimes the mentors are, I think of them like experts. Like when you need a doctor for ear, nose, throat, you go to an ENT. When you need somebody to help with supply chain, you get a supply chain specialist. Sometimes our entrepreneurs just need a friend, like somebody who is similar in their demographics or their lived experiences, who can just say like, this is hard and you've got it. So we try to pull an assortment of mentors that can hit emotional, tactical, all of it. And so we build all that. And then each class, we ask for feedback at the end of each class. Do we keep the class? Do we get rid of this class? A couple edits we've made throughout these programs. For example, the first cohort had a class on TikTok. TikTok Shop was a really good way to get D2C. And it was for a lot of our founders, we found their age demographics they struggle with new tech. So we built a class around, and then all of a sudden we could be getting rid of TikTok. So I had to pivot our class. I don't want to continue offering a class that literally I could wake up on Tuesday and is no longer important.
No longer useful.
Yeah. So what's another digital resource? What's another tool that we can pull in? So we started the program. The very first iteration, it was me as the facilitator with a couple guest speakers. And then I started really seeing how important it was to have somebody who was responsive to what's going on in the world and can understand things like tariffs, can understand things like, because while I understand business and like best case business scenarios, I don't know what it's like to have your product manufactured in China. And then all of a sudden have to pivot all of that. That's the right, and start basically from scratch in, let's say, Monaco, right? And that was really the story of an entrepreneur. So as the program iterated, we brought in this mentor in residence who, as a human, is just a freaking amazing human. Like I can't say enough about her as just if I were to meet her on the street. But as a business, she built a company from the ground up. She is so resourceful. She didn't have like a network of family that could fund something. She built it. She really empathizes with our entrepreneurs and their story. So in real time, she's pitching for money. She's reaching out to other programs to join them. She's guerrilla marketing. She's building these tools or community-based marketing. She's building these tools that are exactly the playbook of people in our program. And so that was a really enriching point. And then, so not only is our curriculum iterating based on what we're seeing in the world, the supports we're pulling in are iterating is what we're seeing in the world. We always knew that it was going to be important to give them reps or practice at a buyer pitch. So we built out a buyer pitch event where it's educational, right? Where we bring buyers in and the buyers give them live feedback on how they're doing with their pitch. So that when
that's a great feature.
It's hard.
It is. It is.
To recruit for.
It is.
But I go off the data at the beginning of the year and I see, okay, so this person's dream is to pitch and get into an Ulta. And so then I creepily go to LinkedIn and I try to source buyers, associate buyers from Ulta, Sephora, any of those beauty spaces to create a simulation of what the goal is. And so the coordination of that is incredibly difficult, but so beneficial for where they're trying to go. For some of them, as for some of them, their life cycle, they're not ready for that buyer at, I say Ulta.
Correct.
They need a buyer who's maybe one step below, who's a generalist.
Beauty supply at their local, in their local market or at the region level, distributor, buyer.
Confidence, or to build their acumen around a conversation like that. So there's a lot of cultivation and there's a lot of work. And we've built over the past 2 years this network of buyers who, I'll tell you, buyers get emails and hear pitches nonstop. And so to give us an hour of their time on a quarterly basis is, again, just a gift. And they come, they join, they listen to 2 pitches, they provide amazing feedback. A lot of them do it because it ignites passion. They're like, oh, this is why I'm a buyer. Like, I get to give back, I get to support. It's 2-way communication instead of just being inundated with requests. And so we've had amazing buyers join our programs, many of which have turned into content experts for us too, which has been wonderful, or mentors, which is awesome as well.
Just fantastic. And I can't stress enough how fantastic that inside outlook is from a person who has spent 25, 30 years of working with buyers, calling on buyers, and being in that space. One of the things that I think we underestimate is the view from the buyer side of the desk. And many of the, training content out there and how-to content, frankly, comes from people with my point of view and experience, which is primarily on the other side of the desk, which is selling to a buyer. And while that information and that point of view is valuable, and there are very effective techniques being taught from that point of view, if you don't understand the buyer's point of view, and frankly, in many cases now, most of your even mid-level to large retailers have complete programs and training for their buyers to make sure that they're actually prepared to be the best negotiator on behalf of that company, which means that buyer is getting prepped and trained to be very, very good at not giving you technically what you want or being a very easy doorway into that retailer. So you do need the real training. And one of the things that I love about your program that I stress to my clients a lot, because I get a lot of founders who are very self-confident, tend to be more extroverted. They've pitched their brand or their idea for a couple of years now. And so when they come into the conversation with me, they're very, very, very confident in their ability to get in front of a buyer. So they don't want to really practice. They don't want to try out different methods and have conversations. And that leads to potentially that drawback of not understanding the buyer's perspective and how that for that particular retail, how that buyer's perspective may have really changed. So I so appreciate that you guys were able to provide that experience. And man, and kudos to you for LinkedIn stalking to find the people to do it. Because let me tell you, having worked with a lot of these retailers, even at some of their biggest accounts, I've worked, as a team lead for Procter & Gamble, Colgate, and you still can't get buyers to actually return a call or a text or an email sometimes. And so that is something that I think, again, is a testimony to the power of Seed Spot and the leadership that you bring to the table over there.
That's so kind. Yeah, I will say, I think the biggest pivot our curriculum took was I noticed a gap. Our founders are so passionate. They've got this why. They built a product specifically for their grandma, their daughter, their child, right? And so they believe they know everything there is to know about the wants, the needs, the fears, the psychology, you name it. But at the end of the day, they don't know their numbers. They don't know consumer trends. They know their consumer. They don't know the trends. And the buyer buys for trends. They want to be ahead of the trends. So the biggest pivot we took in our curriculum is, how do you tell data-driven stories? Because the buyer, while they might love your touchy-feely story about your child with eczema, they like it for a minute. And their goal is an ROI. They want their product that they discovered to be the hot new Labubu of the season, right? And so how are you going to position yourself in real-time data? How do you know the ins and the outs of your product so well that you've done all the buyer's work? The buyer doesn't have to go and research anything because it's all there on the chart.
Wow.
That was a really important point. Can we hear that again?
The biggest pivot our curriculum took was I noticed a gap. Our founders are so passionate. They've got this why. They built a product specifically for their grandma, their daughter, their child, right? And so they believe they know everything there is to know about the wants, the needs, the fears, the psychology, you name it. But at the end of the day, they don't know their numbers. They don't know consumer trends. They know their consumer. They don't know the trends. And buyer buys for trends. They want to be ahead of the trends. So the biggest pivot we took in our curriculum is how do you tell data-driven stories? Because the buyer, while they might love your like touchy-feely story about your child with eczema, they like it for a minute. And their goal is an ROI. They want their product that they discovered to be the hot new Labubu of the season, right? And so how are you going to position yourself in real-time data? How do you know the ins and the outs of your product so well that you've done all the buyer's work? Like the buyer doesn't have to go and research anything because it's all there on the chart. You're
making the buyer's job easier.
Easy. Yep, that is your job. And so our very first class, we go through the wants, the needs, the fears of a buyer, right? Try to get into the mind of a buyer. How do you build your pitch to answer all of their questions? Because what I often find is the pitch is built for Shark Tank. The pitch is built for a pitch competition. So it's filled with the heart. It's
an angel investor.
It's built, and your heart is why you do the work, and it's why you wake up every day to face the dragon one more time. The reality is the buyer doesn't care about your dragon. The buyer cares about your dollar. And so we have to get them to a place where they have this fire, this passion, and they have the data. So we brought in some amazing speakers. We brought in a consumer trends gentleman that worked for groceries, a network of grocery stores. He also worked for Amazon at a time or two. And so he came in and he talked about 10 of the big, and it's interesting, right? Like we're noticing, for example, the Ozempics of the world. And we have all these products that are not at all related to Ozempic. But his point was like, people are spending money on Ozempic, so their behavior for other decisions is shifting. So here people are thinking like, okay, I can't possibly compete with Ozempic. You're right. But you need to tell a story that makes the demand for your product as important as the perceived reality of your life on Ozempic, right? So you have to play in the sandbox, right? He came in and delivered a really beautiful, and like also where to find the data, how to demystify the data, how to do the work and research that. He was amazing. We also had an individual come in and talk about kind of like, how do you go to your retailer, pull out the data, and then look at the data, like lift the hood up and figure out, okay, what is my velocity? How am I performing? And then build strategies to increase that, because your big box retail, they don't want to be the one to take a risk on you. They don't want to be the first to buy your product. They want you to have tried it locally, to get your supply chain buttoned up before they take that big risk on you. So you should have data. You should, from your website, have a ton of solid D2C. From your social media, have a ton of great insights D2C. And then from your actual retailer, be able to look at all that data and then have that in front, like present it in the deck to the buyer. Again, no guess games. It's all easy peasy. So I think we started from a place of the curriculum was kind of like, we tried to hit all of these different pockets of running a business. And then we really leaned into making sure that gap between what the buyer wants and what the entrepreneur perceives, and eliminating that gap. Let's get everybody on the same page. So
it's such a great point. And I want to give you again kudos, Tristan, because your passion is just palatable in terms of why some of these things are so important. And I know for those watching, you're probably furiously jotting these notes down and thinking like, man, she's dropping a lot of knowledge in a little bit of time. And it's true. But I want to just double click on a couple of things that you said that were so poignant, even in what I think your founders were able to distill from the Retail Accelerator program about the use and the importance of data. But definitely in terms of the difference in the point of view of who you're selling to and why you might need a different deck and a different pitch for a different audience, right? I tell a lot of my clients sometimes, you watch Shark Tank, and I advise a lot of my clients to watch Shark Tank to understand how to pitch to investors. But investors are purchasing or buying you as a founder, which is why your heart story matters in an investor pitch, because an investor is usually buying you ultimately. Your brand, your ideas, great. We love that. But an investor is ultimately, when they're making a decision to invest in your brand, they're really making a decision to invest in you. Mm-hmm. But a buyer's buying your consumers. The buyer could care less about your heart tug story, and they could really care less to a degree about your brand. They want your consumers, right? Yeah. They want the audience that your brand brings into their store. Mm-hmm. That's why a buyer is buying you. Yeah. And you're right. I see far too many founders take their credible, very, very moving and poignant investor pitch and bring it into the buyer pitch and expect it to work the same sort of magic. And it just doesn't work like that, right? Because as you pointed out, the buyer's being measured by metrics internally. And typically, some of those key metrics are, how profitable are you? Are you growing sales? Are you growing traffic to our store or to your aisle? Like, those are the three things, right? And if you can't somehow fit your narrative of why your brand matters into their metrics, you'll never get the sale. And so I love the fact that you brought that up and dialed that up in terms of how you not just kind of iterated the programming, because to your point, the technology, the techniques, the strategies are consistently changing with the reality of different products. And you even made a great point. There can be a product that can change an entire category and make certain categories at risk of no longer being relevant. Ozempic is a perfect example, right? Ozempic has rendered a lot of other product categories somewhat irrelevant, because now with this product, you no longer need all of these other additional aids to lose weight. And so it may make a lot of brands in those spaces rethink and have to pivot on how they actually, again, matter to the buyer. So I love that. Now, as you guys, obviously preached data as a big resource and key metric for your founders to actually track and pay attention to. It also sounds like you internally, from a team standpoint, made sure you track success for your programs, et cetera. And so tell me a little bit about the KPIs and some of the things that you as a team look at this to track what's the success of our programming, and are we making a difference out there?
Yeah. Oh, man. So we have a whole strategic plan related to outcomes. We are in the process. Over the past year, we built a framework, an educational framework. So my first job was an elementary school teacher. And really the only way to gauge if your kids are learning is by looking at how they're performing against frameworks. And so it's no different in adults. Like, if I want to know that our programs are making an impact, we need a framework for success. We need milestones for that. And we call those benchmarks for us. And then we have different measures, different questions we ask at different times to see how what those outcomes are. I think some of the most tried and true are going to be your net performer, right? Your NPS. We ask about NPS scores. We also measure something called entrepreneurial self-efficacy. And that's broken into kind of 5 different areas, being able to marshal resources, financials, planning. So our goal is to see growth in ESE.
In those areas.
Yep, over the program. We also look at outcomes. For example, if we break down, it's kind of a choose your own adventure in the sense that I would love to see a PO, specifically with the retail program. I'd like to see a partnership. I'd like to see a PO. I'd like to see an increase in sales that ultimately what you're
distribution.
You're applying, and there is actual growth. Now, growth could look like humans. You could be hiring team members. You could be building a board. Growth could be in your revenue, but there is some kind of growth marker around that. And so we have all these kind of checks and balances throughout the program. We're in the process of building an assessment tool. So an entrepreneur will come into a program, they'll take a pre-assessment, and it will basically turn out you are a level 2. Here are some goals for you to focus on in this program to increase your level. And so a level 2 might be related to you have early traction, but your sales are at X. Or it could be you're in prototype and not in market, right? And so It'll be a good way for us to then say, okay, 90% of our participants started at a level X, and we're noticing that the average over the course of a year is we can increase them by 3 levels.
Yeah,
so
we love that.
We're starting to build some of that. Like I meant, we have an educational framework. We've got those benchmarks. We've got the assessments built into our feedback and our post surveys. And so now we're starting to get to a place where we're envisioning what this assessment tool can look like for the individuals. And then I'm excited to see on a macro level, like what happens through the course of our program. And it's so difficult in entrepreneurship because most of entrepreneurship is fireside chats and conversations. And so we'll be able to finally say in our grant application,
personal level.
Yes, absolutely. That here are some tangible outcomes that we've been able to build for, over the course of a year, we work with just under 1,000 entrepreneurs, right? So we're really moving the needle, and this is what that looks like for us. So
I love that.
That's
I love that. I mean, creating that score and that framework too, I think would be super helpful just in general for all of us that support the ecosystem.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm jokingly kind of thinking of a similar, scoring system. I watch this stupid TV show, Naked and Afraid, and they give all these people these scores at the beginning. They're like, your survival score is 6.5, right? And if you actually make it through the 21 days, it goes up to 7.3. But if you actually tap out, they actually drop the score. And by the end of the episode, they'll say, yeah, he didn't make it. He wasn't able to make fire. The guy couldn't eat for 3 days. He went from a 5.7 to a 4.2, right? And then you leave kind of like, oh, man, I got the 4.2. I got to get my survival skills up. But I think in a very similar way, it would be so cool to watch the C-Spot structure and framework advance to a point where you can just on a common day, basis, talk to somebody and say, well, hey, what's your seed spot like entrepreneurial score? And then, like, I can even put it on my LinkedIn, like my seed spot entrepreneurial score is a 6.5, right? And I grew it 3.2 points in the last cohort. That would be like super, super important for not just, I think, the founders to understand their progress and for you from a program administrator to really market, but then for all of us outside who are supporting those founders and those brands to really be able to confidently say, I know when I engage with this founder, they get margin, right? Like they get velocity. They understand how to put a product item page together, right? They understand TikTok versus Instagram and how it should be used. And I think you guys are doing such a great service because in many ways, I personally, as a consultant who works with a lot of these founders who haven't yet gone through a program like SeedSpot, they're making a lot of those mistakes, right? Like on a daily basis, they're making a lot of these mistakes.
I think the goal too is to provide, we have so many entrepreneurs that'll get off a call with a mentor and they'll be like, it didn't really work. And I'll ask, okay, well, we have a whole class on like, you set a goal, when you like research your mentor, what are their skills? How would that benefit you? Go in with questions, like prepare yourself for that meeting. It would be so nice to add that layer of like, this is your goal for the program. So when you go into the mentor meeting, you have this like foundation to have conversations from that's not obtuse, that's really focused, so that you can have the best experience both for the mentor and the entrepreneur. And so instead of kind of working from two different spaces and trying to find, like, you just write in that first meeting, like, here's my score, here's where we go. So here's to hope.
I love it. So you had mentioned earlier in the program that the next cohort has already processed kind of wise. You've already gone through the process of identifying the new members. Tell us a little bit about the program. And then I know for founders that are watching and are listening, they're probably thinking, man, this is something that I need to get involved in ASAP. And so I want to make sure you talk to them a little bit about some of the other programs and maybe application dates or opportunities that may be available for them to apply for in the future.
You got it. Yeah. So SeedSpot doesn't just do retail programs.
Nice.
We do all types of programs. We've got impact accelerators, which are basically agnostic from a category. These are all businesses usually in, I would say, year 0 to 2, or maybe even to year 5, while you're still kind of working out some of the basics. We do a lot of partner programs. We just finished recruiting for a cohort of all nonprofits. We have another program we just got done recruiting for where everybody is in the kind of health equity space. So come to our website and go to our programs. There'll be a drop down with applications and details. But at the core of what we do, we are here to support impact-driven entrepreneurs, whether that be in retail, whether that be in mental health, whether that be in nonprofits. We are always here to support people creating good in this world, because that should be the one thing consistent, is that people do good, whether it be through business or just through their day-to-day, right? And on top of that, we run locally in Arizona an in-person hybrid program called Startup Spring Training, where we offer micro grants in that program. That's a really unique, fun play on Spring Training in Arizona program. Super great for established or new businesses.
Nice.
We work the bases, and we have mentorship, and there's like 75 free classes over the course of 3 weeks. It's crazy and fast and busy and wonderful. And so we meet people from all over the state, and we're able to support them. But this next cohort, again, it's emerging brand. It is a 10-week program. We meet twice a week. We will run it one more time later in the year. So if you fit that category, the applications will go live. So again, go to our website to check that out. And as I said, all of our programs, we have newsletters. We've got a YouTube channel where we're offering content all the time. So you can stay in contact with us. And I call them little learning lily pads. If you think about a frog, how it hops around, you can come and be in the pond and hop around on the lily pads and learn all these different things and apply it when it's necessary, and come back when you need something new or something different. And then we always have office hours. There's people who are happy to answer questions. We have general email. You can send an email and we'll give you some resources too. But our program deadlines are always going to be found on our website.
Love it. We will definitely be sharing that information as part of this episode. And so for the viewers, as always, we will have a feature on our website, which is the blueprint.biz, where you can actually go. You will see Tristan's link profile, and we'll also have a link to the SeedSpot website where you can go directly to the website from our page and sign up, which I would strongly encourage you to do for the newsletter, so you can stay abreast of all of the upcoming programs that SeedSpot has to offer. And it's funny that you said that. I love that, learning lily pads. It's kind of like, SeedSpot Froggers, like a video game from my childhood where you had to get the frog all the way to the top of the screen, right? So if you can get out there, audience, and really tap into all of the great resources that SeedSpot is offering across, and again, a virtual footprint. So this is not just the Phoenix. Oh, and by the way, what was the timing on the next window for the local hybrid Phoenix-based program for our listeners in the area?
You got it. We offer that every year during the spring. So we're talking March. Spring training starts end of February, usually in Arizona. So our program, we try to time it as closely with spring training as possible. It's pretty much the entire month of March, and about half of April is when we wrap it. And so you can actually sign up now to receive information about what that looks like. If you go to our website, there's a tab there, learn more and join our mailing list for Startup Spring Training. We do that in partnership with Chicanos por la Causa. We have we have an English and a Spanish track. So you can be taking classes entirely in Spanish or entirely in English. It's really beautiful. Our end program, we do like a big pitch celebration, and we stagger a pitch in English and a pitch in Spanish. Or sometimes it's both languages in real time.
That's huge.
Yeah, especially in Arizona. So
especially in Arizona, to your point. But it should be something that we should be looking at standard across the majority of the country. I find there's so much entrepreneurial activity in the immigrant community, especially in the Hispanic community, both first, second, third generation and new to the country. And you're right. Here in Arizona, if you're not engaging that community, you're not engaging more than half of the population, which is completely insane. So happy to hear that my Latina and Latino brothers and sisters can get some programming, not only, designed to their business and needs, but in their language, which makes a lot of sense as well, right? From an efficiency standpoint. So just so many things that you guys are doing, Tristan, that I am so excited to share with the audience. Just as a final wrap up before we transition out, I want to talk a little bit, or have you share with the audience as they think about, especially founders who I think many times are debating the cost, benefit ratio of signing up for and showing up for a program like the accelerator programs that SeatSpot hosts versus going at it alone, or maybe even in this new iteration, using AI or some other, tool to try to facilitate this learning. If you could give our audience of some parting advice on how to maybe think about or evaluate programs like SeatSpot in terms of their fit for them, what would you tell them?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's a time commitment, right? Like it's a relationship in a lot of ways. And the same way that we vet partners in our life, we should vet where we put our energy. And so I think the young people would say it's a vibe check, but
yeah, exactly.
Join our newsletters. If it feels like a safe space, a lot of entrepreneurship, we keep really close. We're afraid of sharing. It's a reflection of ourselves. If you can't share what makes your business magic with an organization you're going to spend time with, then run for the hills. Get on those 15-minute calls, join webinars, get on newsletters. I think a big thing to look for is, are they asking for equity, and are you comfortable with that? Because some companies are like, sure, take 5%. And that's a lot of what the accelerator incubator community does, is the program is free, but they ask for 1%. And for a lot of people, that works well. Like that's expected and we're comfortable with that. But for some people, I would say there should be an alternative, and we do not take equity. So that's another part of the value proposition for us. What makes us different is we're not going to take 1%.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah. We believe that entrepreneurs are already, especially diverse founders, are already working against so many systems. So why don't we empower them? Why don't we give them education? Why don't we give them network? Why don't we give them tools instead of take? And so we don't take any equity. We haven't since our inception. And when we can, we try to fund, right? We have, like with our startup spring training, we provide micro grants. In these RBA programs, we provided micro grants to our founders to help them with certification programs. Like we attempt to, when we can, and when there's the grant funding, we attempt to support as much as we can, educationally, fiscally. And so that, there's so many checks and balances, but what I will say at the end of the day is, whomever you're partnering with, make sure that it's where you can spend safely a lot of your time, take risks, feel supported. And if you check those boxes, sign up.
Whoa, we need to hear that one more time.
There's so many checks and balances, but what I will say at the end of the day is, whomever you're partnering with, make sure that it's where you can spend safely a lot of your time, take risks, feel supported. And if you check those boxes, sign up. And there are a lot of players in this ecosystem that are safe spots. And you can look at their track record. We often get asked, like, okay, who have you worked with that's been on Shark Tank?
Right.
And it's like,
who's made $1 million already?
Right. And I get why. You see yourself as being the next product, but at the end of the day, it's like, your story is unique, and Shark Tank might not be for you. Giving a big percent of your company might not be a good reality for you.
Exactly.
So maybe your question shouldn't be, who's the most famous person you worked with? And it should be, tell me a success story about a brand you worked with and what that success looked like for them. Because I could tell you hundreds of stories. At this point, I've been at the company almost 10 years. So thousands of stories. And I would be pleased to share those, but not all of them ended up in Shark Tank. And the ones that ended up in Shark Tank, probably
not all of them ended up successful, right? Yep.
Right. So again, find somebody that keeps you feeling safe and seen and secure, and that you can have failures and you can take risks, and they're there to support and cheer you on.
I love that. I mean, look, great list of advice there, because from the beginning of vibe checking, which I am definitely with young folks on that, right? I think both of us agree, right? There's sometimes just a simple initial vibe check. Like if the vibe's not there, if you're not really feeling the program, the person, or the people you initially engage with, maybe it's not the program for you. So appreciate you, though, bringing up the point about non-dilutable programs versus dilutable programs, because that is a reality, right? And I do find, I will go out on the limb and say this is not data driven. This is just my, one single experience. But I tend to find that most of our minority founders and startups are being pushed in the direction of offering up equity more often than not in lieu of funding, because they are coming from, in many cases, very, very limited resources. And so I'm a very big proponent of holding on to your equity as much as possible and not, frankly, giving it up for education-based opportunities, because there's programs out here like Seed Spot, guys. There's Tristan out here helping y'all out without asking you for any equity. So there's no reason for you to give up 10% for the quote unquote consultant who just wants to kind of ride along. And that's to say that anybody and everybody out here who is offering or asking for those kinds of deals are not in your best interest. But I think, Tristan, the last piece of advice you gave is the best. Really understand what you need out of the program and what success then looks like for the person asking you for equity to get you there. And if they can't give you an example of success that fits what your needs are in that arena, then they're probably not the best fit for you, especially at the cost of a percentage of your business or your company.
So true. All right, Dana, it has been a pleasure, but I must go with some entrepreneurs here today. Thank you much for your continual support. If there's anything you know where to find me.
No, thank you as well. And we will definitely be sharing this episode soon on our channels. Until then, watch out, follow, like, and share all of the content on the Brand Blueprint. Thanks again, Tristan, for coming on, and we'll see you the next time.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us on the Brand Blueprint journey. Make sure to follow us on all of our social media platforms to stay updated. Watch the full episodes on our YouTube channel for an in-depth experience. Don't forget to subscribe to our website at thebrandblueprint.biz for exclusive content and materials. We're everywhere you need us to be.